Hello friends, welcome to the channel tutorialconnect.com. Today in this session we will discuss call, bind and apply of JavaScript, which was introduced in our ES6 version of JavaScript ECMAScript. Okay, ECMAScript 2015, which was launched in 2015. Okay, so basically we will discuss what is call, what is bind and what is apply, and we will discuss what is the difference between them and when to apply or when to use call, bind and apply. Okay, so basically remember that it was introduced in ES6 version of ECMAScript that was introduced in 2015. Okay, so basically these call, a apply and bind, these are mainly used to bind the scope. Okay, inside any function. Okay, so if you want to bind some scope inside any function, okay, we use call, bind and apply. Okay, so we will start with an example. Okay, let's suppose we have an JSON here. Let s equal to, we have a data here like name Amit. Okay, age 34, and we have, let's suppose, salary 50,000. Okay, so we have in JSON. Now we will have a method here, get details. Okay, and we have a function which takes two parameters, that is, like, suppose serial number, and you have a status. Okay, now what we will going to return, or you can just console so that we can easily print it out. Okay, we will create a string here. Okay, with serial number first, serial number, then we have details. Okay, so we have name, then we have age, then we have salary. We don't need salary right now, we will just print the status. Okay, that will, string will belong. Okay, so what we have did, we have a JSON inside, JSON object inside which we have some data, and we have a method, okay, which will return this serial number, status, and with name and status. Okay, so what will happen if you will call this one? See what will happen. Will you get this name or age or status or not? Okay, so let's suppose we will have get details with serial number 1 and status, let's suppose, passed. Okay, so we are getting age is not defined. So for that we have to use the scope of this block object. Okay, so we should have to write this dot age. Okay, now what we are getting? We are getting serial number, name from this object, age and status we are passing with the function, and it is passed. Okay, now what will happen? Let's suppose you want to use the same method with some other object. Let's suppose you have another object, data, with data with some other fields like John, age 23, age 2000. Okay, and we have another one more record. Okay, okay, so this is two more JSON object. Okay, That means, let's suppose if you want to use this method with this data, so how can you use that? Okay, so for this we have method called call or apply or bind. Okay, so the scenario is, if you want to apply this object inside this method so that it can achieve your name and age, then what you have to do, you have to use the call or bind or apply. So we will test with all three. Okay, so we have s dot get details, and then what we will do, we will use the call first. Okay, call, and what the parameters it takes, you can see it takes this argument, that means scope. Okay, so you need to pass the scope, and then you have rest operator arguments. Okay, so what you will do, you will pass s2. s2 is our second object scope. Okay, and then we have arguments. Okay, so what are the arguments we have? We have id and status. So what we will do, we will pass id, let's suppose 2, and we have status, let's suppose failed. So you can see in the console we are using the same method, but here we are changing the scope so that this get details will target to this scope. Okay, and now inside this it will get the scope of s2, and it will print the name and age of this scope. Okay, that means this object. Okay, so if you pass s here, so what happens, you can see, if you pass the same scope of same parent scope, means same scope, then you will get the same result, Amit and 34 age. Okay, now we will check with the another one called apply. If we use apply with, let's suppose we have used with s1, s2, and now we will use with s3, and we have 3 in the status pending, let's suppose. So you can see there is an error, create list from array like. Okay, there is an error. So what apply says that when you pass the arguments, okay, you have to pass the arguments like array. Okay, means the second parameter after your scope will be an array, and inside array the number of parameters will be your according to your parameters of the function. So you can see in output we have Ajay here, which is the third one, and age 43, and status what we have did pending. Okay, so now what is the use of third one, bind? So you have got the difference between the call and apply. In call, the main difference is that we are passing the arguments in comma separated. Okay, whereas in apply we are passing the arguments as array. Okay, so this is the main difference between call and apply. So you can remember from call that it starts with C, so you can remember it like comma, and in apply it starts with A, so you can remember with array. Okay, bind is totally different, so we will check now with bind. Okay, so get details, and we should use bind, and we will have here, you can see. Okay, it will take arguments and array. Okay, so now we will use, let's suppose s2 we will pass, or you can say s. Okay, s2 s2 is okay. Okay, s2, and then we will have 4, let's suppose, and the status passed. So see what will happen. If you will call like this, you can say in console you are not getting any result. Okay, That means it is not executed this time. Okay, if you store in any variable, and then you will console.log a, what you will see, you have a bound get details. Bound means you have binded some scope, and this is the method name. Okay, but if you console this one, apply, if we are consoling the apply, what we will get, we are getting undefined. That means apply is not returning anything, whereas bind is returning a new function which is bounded with another scope. Okay, similarly you can check with call, it's equal to, so you can say still it is getting undefined in call and undefined in apply, whereas in bind you are getting a bound function. Okay, means a new function is you are getting in return, and it is bounded with some other scope. Okay, so now the thing is, when you have to execute this, how can you execute this? Okay, so to execute this function, you will call it like this, and you will get your fourth result, John 23 first. Okay, that means the main difference is that call and apply is executed once you call it. Okay, but when you call the bind, it will not execute at that time. You will get a new function in return with binded scope, and it's your choice when you want to run it. Okay, so this is the main difference. Okay, so now what we will see that what will happen if you have not defined the parameters here. Okay, and when you call it, then you define the parameter, then what will happen, it's still working. That means you don't need to pass at that time as well. You can pass the function parameters later as well. But what will happen if you pass the arguments like array as you have passed with apply? So what will happen? You can see you are getting the first one as id, but you are not getting the past one as status. Inside it is getting undefined. That means if you pass the arguments like this, you will not get the exact output. So that in bind you have to pass the arguments in comma separated only. That's why it will work. Otherwise it will not properly work. Okay, it will take out only your first if you will pass as array. Okay, so till now what we have learned, in call it executes at the same time, execute same time when you call it. Okay, and arguments are in comma. Okay, and it returns undefined. So we have three things, then separate it like this. So these are the three main difference. Okay, so this will also be execute same time. Arguments are in array, and it also returns undefined. Okay, that means when you call the apply, it will be executed at the same time. Arguments are in array. Okay, and it returns undefined. Now what will happen with bind? Executes later. Okay, executes later, and arguments are in comma, okay, and returns a bound function, bound new function, okay. So it will basically return a bounded function, which is new function, okay, with the new scope, okay. So these are the main differences, okay. And also in Bind you can pass arguments either at time of binding or at time of call, okay. So this is the one more difference, okay. So you can pass your arguments either at the time of binding your scope or at the time of calling, but the arguments should only be comma separated, otherwise it will not proper work if you give in array, okay. So once more I repeat it. In call, it is executed at the same time, arguments are in comma, and it returns undefined. Similarly, you can remember this comma with call, that means both are starts with C, and in apply, A starts with array, that's why you can remember it, and bind is totally different case, okay. So it only works with comma, and if you pass array, then it will partially work, okay. Means that one first parameter will be executed and rest parameters will ignored, okay. And now in bind we have been executing later, arguments are in comma separated, return a bound new function, okay. So basically we will show you a scenario, okay, a simple scenario uh, where you can use this bind, okay, so that you could get your, because call and apply are executed same time, so you can easily use that. But why we use bind, in which scenario bind is more benefit to use, okay. So we will discuss that all, okay. So what we will do, we will just erase this out, okay, okay. Let's suppose we have a class, okay, class, and it is named demo, let's suppose, okay. So we have the class which is named as demo, and we have a constructor here inside class, okay. And let's suppose we have a variable name and we have a, okay, and we have a get name method here, okay, which will console this dot name, okay. And we have another method which is not a declaration function, it is a arrow function, okay. It is called name2. So what will happen if you, let's suppose if you have a initialization of demo with new keyword, okay, we have a new instance of demo, okay, and now we will have d dot get name. So in get name you are getting your name that is defined inside your class, okay. Now we are going to use the second method with arrow function, so still you are getting name, okay. Up to this there is no difference between this arrow and this is declaration function and this is arrow function, okay. Up to this you are not getting any issue, okay. Now what happens, let's suppose there is an asynchronous operation like set timeout, and we will have to pass here method. So we will use the first method with declaration function, and we have 2 seconds of delay, and then we have to give some parameter if there is parameter, otherwise you don't need to give. Let's suppose we need some parameter. Okay, so I will create a, let's suppose it is a greet with add greet with name. So we will have greet here. Okay, so if you will pass greet, I am it, and into as well, yep, I am it. Okay, okay. Now we will have to, how do we pass it? The parameter we will pass it here hi, or another hello. Okay, so after 2 seconds, what you are getting, hello is passing here. Okay, because you are directly passing the hello greet inside your declaration function, but you can see that you are getting preview frame inside your this method call. You are not getting a method. Why this happened? If you will console the this scope, what you will get, uh, you have to print it like simplify and pass it as this. Okay, so this is a circular issue. Okay, let's suppose. Okay, see, in this scenario, in these two scenario, if you are calling this first, okay, directly, then you are getting the scope which is called demo, that is class scope. You are getting class scope inside this. Okay, this has get name and name as well. Okay, and when you call this arrow function, okay, if you again call this one, what you are getting, you are again getting the same one. Okay, means if you directly calling the call um, class methods, you are getting the class scope. But when you are using the same method, okay, inside the timeout, okay, then what you are getting the scope, you are getting the window scope. That means your windows scope. Okay, and you are getting this values of whole window. Okay, and here you are getting the name from here. That means preview frame is the name of your, let's suppose this frame UI. Okay, so you are getting your parent scope this. Okay, inside this timeout. Okay, now what we will do, if you change this with arrow function. Okay, so you can see in arrow function you are getting the class scope only, not the window scope only. Okay, so here is the issue that this declaration function which are using, okay, it is not getting the scope what you are going to use. You are getting the windows. Okay, that's the main problem. Okay, if you change this with arrow, then it is okay. You will get your desired output. But let's suppose you don't want to need to arrow functions, then what you will do? Okay, then you have to use your bind. Okay, this bind method. Okay, first we will check with call and apply, then we will use for bind. Okay, now we will, what we will do, we will comment this out. Okay, what we will do, we will check with call, and you will have to pass the scope. So our main scope is initialized scope is this one. Okay, so we will pass this one, and we have parameter here. Okay, so what you are getting? You are getting the demo scope correctly if you bind this one. Otherwise, you will not get this demo. You will get window. Okay, but the issue is if you bind this, you will initially means at, when you execute it. Okay, then only it is called. It will be not called after 2 seconds. Okay, when you binded it at the same time, it is going to call. It is not waiting for 2 seconds. Okay, so if you want to get the delay exactly, what you will have to do, you will have to check with apply first, then we will go for bind. Okay, in apply, you will have to give, let's suppose 5 seconds, then you can easily get the see. It doesn't wait, the response doesn't wait for 5 seconds. When you called it, it immediately gave the output. That means you are not getting the here. Okay, so if you console the this one this time, okay, so you are getting detached and defined. That means you have not waiting for 5 seconds. Okay, before waiting means immediately when you call the apply or call, it will be executed, your result will be there. It is not waiting for 5 seconds. Okay, and hello will be passed only if the 5 seconds is completed. Okay, then only you will get here hello. Similarly, there is with call, you will not get and hello there. Okay, so for that case, what you have to do, you have to use the bind. Means you have to bind first, then after 5 seconds, you see the delay. Now you can see the delay. It is really delaying for 5 seconds, and then hello is passing as the greet, and then you are getting the exact result. So in this scenario, your bind is giving you a benefit. Okay, so this is the way you can bind the scope, and there is one more way. If you are using the class, then what you do inside constructor, you can just do it this dot get name equal to this dot get name dot bind. You will just bind at the initializing time only. And this constructor will be called, this will be binded. Okay, and then only you will get all things. Okay, in name as well. You don't need to bind the scope here when you call it. Okay, so what is the issue? Cannot reproduce setting name. Okay, so here you are getting hello after 5 seconds. So there is, that means this is working properly. Okay, so you can also use this. You can also define your name here as well. Okay, so that if you find the scope, it will work properly. Okay, so now there should not be any error. Okay, so you can see this is the use of exact use of bind. Okay, so I hope you got the differences between call, apply, and bind. Okay, you can see this. Remember this one as your summary to remember it for long, that C for comma and A for apply. Okay, and bind will be executed later after the calling. Okay, after the binding it will be called later. Okay, and okay, okay. Thanks for watching this session. Okay, and we will get more topics on JavaScript, ESX features. Okay, and subscribe our channel, like this video. Thank you.